Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hey everyone, so my name is Elisa McIntosh. I'm a bookseller at the Bookstore Plus in Lake Placid, New York. And today I'm super excited. I'm going to be talking with Liv Mae Morris, the author of The Last Dragon House. Liv Mae Morris was a 2022 Lambda Literary Fellow and 2024 recipient of the Bank Foundation's Susan Camille Prize for Emerging Writers. Equally important, she is the steward of 2 cats and 1 beautiful, chaotic, husky, Chihuahua German Shepherd mix. Originally from Kentucky, she now lives with her wife in Boston, where she is an indie bookseller as well as a writer. I'm so excited, Liv, to talk with you today. I absolutely adore this book. For those of you listening, The Last Dragon House is the funniest, smartest, cutest book there ever was, I swear. It's about a young boy named Ollie who accepts a mysterious job posting that turns out to be at a boarding house for dragons. And there's so much more, and I can't wait to dig into it. So thanks very much for joining us, Liv.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So like I said in your intro, and something that was really cool to learn about you is that you are a bookseller, one of us. So, booksellers, we're surrounded by books all the time. We have access to so much. And so I'm so curious, are there authors that inspired you to branch out from bookselling into actually writing books?
Yeah, well, long before I was a bookseller, I basically have been writing since I could hold a pencil. So the first stories I wrote were about a mouse named Lisa, and they were definitely inspired by Kevin Henkes. I really loved all of his works. He was my first favorite author. I especially loved Sheila Ray the Brave, and Lisa was a lot like Sheila Ray. She was adventurous and brash. As an older kid, I was really obsessed with The Neverending Story and A Wrinkle in Time and everything Louis Sachar wrote. He was my first favorite novelist. I think you can probably still see those influences. But then as an adult, as a bookseller, I have been exposed to so many amazing books that have kind of expanded my sense of what fiction can do and say. So I've been really inspired by authors like Erin Entrada Kelly and Kelly Barnhill and Mariko Tamaki and Gillian Tamaki and M.T. Anderson, as well as adult authors like Nano Kwame Adjei and Jeff Vandermeer. I wouldn't really compare my work to any of theirs because I think they're all geniuses. But those are the authors where I read their books and I'm like, wow, I hope one day I can write something that good. So it really has been exciting to work around so many books and meet authors as a bookseller and just I really have been able to read much more widely because of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, before I was a bookseller, obviously I was just reading what I was drawn to, but we have access to so much now that it's just I totally get that. And I'm so excited that you said Kelly Barnhill because even when we talked about your book through with the Indies Introduced panel, multiple people mentioned that you gave them Kelly Barnhill vibes.
Oh, that's so exciting because
Which is so great.
Yeah, The Girl Who Drank the Moon was one of my comps when I was querying agents, and yeah, I adore Kelly Barnhill. When Women Were Dragons were also obviously
Yeah.
a bit. I vibe with that book very hard,
Same.
but yeah,
Yes.
I love her.
And then even the one with the orphans and the ogress, like
Mhm.
that like sweet vibe. She's so awesome. But yeah, the When Women Were Dragons, I would say, I mean, it's obviously an older book, but it's still one of our top sellers. Like I'm like, who wouldn't? I was like, just think about it. It was like women just they come out of their skin and they turn into dragons.
Yeah.
So amazing. So yeah, so it's just like having all these influences and you read so much, so you have all these different ways to write a story, right? So it's just something that's really, I think, different about The Last Dragon House that I thought was really unique and very cool for middle grade is that it's almost written as like a history from a royal chronicler's point of view. And so you have all these fun little footnotes of his little comments here and there, but really, he's trying to talk about the story about Ollie and his sister. So I was just really curious, instead of, we don't have a dual point of view from Ollie and his sister. And so I was curious, what made you step away from that and kind of go in from the royal chronicler's point of view?
It's honestly hard to remember. I wrote the first draft of this in 2017 as part of an MFA program for children's writing. And then I put it away for like 7 years, because
Wow.
it was a very long, messy draft, and I was like, I can't, this is unsalvageable. So it's hard for me to remember exactly why I made that decision. I think the footnotes were just one of those things where it kind of occurred to me randomly, and I immediately knew it was a good idea and would kind of help the book stand out. And then the Royal Chronicler was probably just like, what would be a good, funny narrator for that kind of thing, like who would be funny to butt in occasionally. And I came up with this kind of like academic who's kind of stuffy and kind of prickly and like very opinionated, so that when he interjects, it's good for humor. I had read children's novels with footnotes before. There's The Amulet of Samarkand, which I might be mispronouncing, and then Whales on Stilts by M.T. Anderson. So I had thought a lot about sort of the potential of those, especially for humor. So yeah, it was kind of fun to sort of construct a character completely through marginalia. And he really he isn't he isn't super present until he is, and like what those moments say about him. So yeah, I think it was just I consider myself lucky, I guess, that I thought of that at some point, because it's the first time I had ever done anything like that, and I think I immediately knew that that was going to sort of shape the book.
Cool. That's crazy. It always blows my mind at how long process of writing a book is. Like you said, your first draft 2017, and here we are in 2026, and it's finally coming out into the world soon.
Yeah,
Um,
I spent a lot of time basically until I realized like, oh, this can be a series. I don't have to fit everything in one book. And then it kind of clicked, and I was like, okay, now I'll revise this. I had a friend who's an agent who kept telling me like, you should really revise that dragon book. And I was like, no. But she was right. So
yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, the footnotes, like you said, they're interjected perfectly throughout. Like the first time, like I mean, you saw I gave you the only like the first loose leaf page of your book at Winter Institute. So we're just flipping through pages. And when I first got to that first footnote, I was like, I started cracking up. I was just like, this is going to be excellent. And I just think it's so funny for a young reader too, especially some of those, little squirrely kids who might be trying to read along with you. And I think they're like perfect little like grab yous to like bring you back in and just to like remember about like what was so funny about
Mhm.
that passage. Um, so good. Dragons, right? They're so big. And you do such a great job. They're so unique and they have so many little personalities. You've got one that looks more like a dog, and its habitat is on a volcano, and you've got a death worm and little fairy dragons. I just loved all the unique ones, the bat dragon. It's just like it's so cool. There, for people who are listening, there are dracorgis, and they are pupas where they're just little larvae and they look like actual corgis. I think that is hilarious. Like when that scene when all the little corgis come out and they're wiggling their butts, I died. So I'm just so curious, how did you come up with some of these? I mean, some of them I feel like make sense, and others they're just so unique, and then you fit in so perfectly thinking about, you did such a great job. They're so in depth. You have so much personality and you have background on them. I'm just so curious how you went about this process.
Yeah, well, one thing I've always loved about dragons is that they can kind of look and act so many different ways and still qualify as dragons. When I first came up for the idea, with the idea for the book, I was playing a lot of Pokemon actually.
Yes,
And I was
I thought
like,
about Pokemon and I was like, some of these. So that's so great. I love that.
I was like, I love how dragon types can truly just be anything. So I knew from the beginning that I wanted a wide variety of dragons. I really wanted this like kind of ragtag group of different body types and skills and sort of clashing personalities, because the contrast between like a shy little fairy dragon and like aggressive, destructive giant death worm can be really funny. And it also just kind of keeps things fresh. So some of them, I do actually kind of remember where a lot of them came from, even though it was a long time ago. I think Mindy was the first one I thought of because I love bats, so I just kind of like, took bats and dragons and mushed them together. I want to say I didn't steal that directly from Pokemon, even though there is a Pokemon who is a bat dragon as well. She's very different from that though. Some of them, Amy, Brutus, and Pebble were all originally footnote jokes.
Interesting.
Um, that and Pebble's original footnote, I don't even think is in the final version. But they just kind of like took on a life of their own. I think in part because with Amy and Brutus, I knew I needed like a group of dragons to go on this quest, and I was like, well, here's two dragons I've named. So and then Pebble was actually the last like central dragon who was added. She wasn't in the original draft at all, and sometimes you just like latch onto an idea. As soon as I added her, I had this like really clear sense of who she was. I was like, this dragon is tiny and she's aggressive and she's obsessed with women's wrestling, and I love her. I love her so much. I must see more of her. So she just kind of like burst on to the page. And then the Jacorgis were very intentional. When I rewrote the book, basically the first like third of the original draft was good, and then the rest was very bad. And I was like, I'm just going to take that original third and sort of shape it into its own book that'll be a series starter. And I knew that I had to have like basically like an event happen in that part of the book, and I was like going through my head like, okay, like what do kids really like? What would be kind of funny? At one point, I was like, um, maybe like an axolotl dragon. But then I got really hung up on like the pink axolotls are the domesticated ones, and the wild ones like look very different, and they're only in this like one lake in Mexico. I think it's really cool, but I was like, I can't like take them out of this like one lake, and then if they're pink, I'm like, how are they domesticated? I got like really hung up on the world building of like axolotls.
But it's so important because I feel like you're gonna have those loyal readers who are gonna be like, wait, or those like you know what I mean? How some kids, especially with axolotls, with how obsessed so many kids are with them now. Like, I think that was so smart because I feel like when you bring in natural elements of like real animals, you're gonna get those people who are like, well, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, especially, and I would have been that kid too, especially with something as specific, because I would have wanted to do like the wild version of the axolotls, because I think they're so cool. But one of the things that's so cool about them is they're literally only like in this one place. So I'm like, I'm not going to take them from that place. So yeah, I remember just like lying in bed and I was like falling asleep and my eyes like snapped open and I was like, Jacorgi. So that's how the Jacorgi happened. I knew I just like needed something kind of funny and quirky. And yeah, people responded very powerfully to the Jacorgis, I will say. They come up a lot.
Oh, I mean, how could they not? I mean, just the idea, like I said, for those of you listening, you have to read the book because getting introduced to all these different dragons is so special. But like the fact that you thought, okay, you know what? The corgi is the larva. Like they're not the full dragon yet. And I love that idea. I think that's just so funny. And it's just the fact that like if you see a corgi walking down the street, I now think like, it's gonna be a dragon one day. It's like I just think it's so cute. And I just want to bring it back to Pebbles quick, just so that those listening, they get a feel. So Pebbles is a fairy dragon, right?
Yes.
From what I remember. I mean, I reread the book. So Pebbles, and like you said, she's the one who loves women's wrestling. I also
Yes.
thought that was hilarious. And again, you so brilliantly pop in these kooky, hilarious little tidbits about your characters. And again, I think that's what makes this book so special. And so Pebbles, I love, we always hear little bits of her, right? So she was, off on her own thing. So just I just love how, like I said, I just love how down the rabbit hole you went for all your characters. And it shows. I just think it's so cool. And that leads me to talking about how what I try to explain to people is that, all these dragons, they're so special and they're so funny, and this is what's going to bring in so many readers. But you have expertly woven in so much more to the book. And I'm curious what you're hoping readers will pick up on. So, we've got the labor movement, you've got, socioeconomic status thrown in there. Like there's so many things that I think are so important to today to talk about. So I'm curious if you're hoping some things will be picked up by certain readers.
Yeah, so The Last Dragon House is it's a political book in many ways. I mean, all books are political, but this one is
Yes, reading is
political.
political.
Yeah. This one's political on purpose. So it's definitely a book with messages, and some of them are very pointed, but I try not to be too didactic because I do trust young readers to form their own relationships with the story. So I guess I hope they find it encouraging or they recognize some of their own sort of love or anger or joy in the characters. And I really, really hope they find it funny. I honestly can't imagine anything more devastating than a 10-year-old not liking my jokes. I've gotten that from my niece and nephew before, and it is really humbling. So I hope they find it funny. I hope it helps fuel like even one kid's dragon obsession because I was absolutely that kid. And there were a lot of books who did that did that for me. So.
Amazing. I think that's exactly why middle grade is, I think, my favorite age group to read. It's so the authors, middle grade authors, so expertly weave in such important tales. And like you said, they trust their readers they meet those standards when they need them. And they like find that message throughout when they need it. So I think just, yeah, middle grade novels, they hit it. And I just think and you did a really great job with all of that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So, obviously, like you said, your draft, which is so interesting to hear that, it was messy because you realized you were trying to cram in just too much into one book. And I'm so glad that this is going to be the start of a series because I can't get enough of it. And you have it set up in a way where you really could go anywhere, right? And I love that Ollie, we have his sister finally coming in towards the end of the novel. So for those of you listening, he's forced to get a job, but his sister is younger, but she does have the ability, and she's actually sees the first dragon, which I think is very cool. So I'm curious, can you share a little bit, where are we going with this series? Are there certain dragons that you have yet to explore that you want to? Is there certain things that you want to do? So I'm just curious where we're going.
Yeah, so the second book is almost finished. I actually just turned in like the final-ish draft to go to the proofreaders.
Ooh, fun.
I don't know if I can share the title yet. It does have a solid title. That's more than could be said for the first book until like well after it was announced. It was announced as just Dragon House, I think. So yeah, the last Dragon House primarily follows Ollie and then sometimes cuts to his sister Jenny, like you said. And this one is the opposite, so most of the focus is on Jenny as she tries to sort of wrangle her magic powers. Pebble gets a lot more page time in this one. She's probably like the dragon with the most page time in this book, so her character gets fleshed out a lot, which I loved because, again, I love Pebble. And there are new dragons. I won't spoil them, but they were really fun to write, and one of them in particular is like one of my favorite characters I've ever written. There are also new humans, and yeah, it kind of expands the conflict. You see more of the labor movement, and also like the efforts to sort of quash it. And I've like barely started writing the third one, so I can't tell you much about like where the series as a whole goes, but it definitely leads into a sort of larger story that's gonna wrap up in the third one.
Cool. So it's going to be a trilogy?
Yes, that's the
Okay.
idea right now, at least.
Okay. I like that. I like a trilogy. I don't have to wait too long. Okay, cool. I love that. And I just love the idea of just being able to just jump back in. And I think it's just so special that it's like the books invite you to join the quest. Like it just feels like, I'm ready to put on my backpack, try to jump on Amy the Death Worm, and just head out there. So for those of you listening, I really hope May 12th is when the book comes out. I'm super stoked for it to finally be out there. It's got cool sprayed edges, which I love that middle grade is starting to get that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you have a blurb from Sarah Beth Durst, who's like the cozy fantasy extraordinaire. And so I feel like automatically for people who are not sure if they want to read it, I know for me personally, I love Sarah Beth Durst. So when I see a blurb from her, I'm like, okay, done. I will read it. So I'm just so excited. So again, May 12th, Liv, you wrote the coolest book. So I'm just so excited. So I hope everyone gets out there. They've got their stacks. Show those sprayed edges, share those dragons, and let's go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!